Renting a home here in Italy is a little bit of a minefield. And so in today's video, I'm going to be unpacking the 4 stages that you can expect to experience when it comes to renting here in Italy. I've been renting here for the entire time that I've lived here, which is now 6 years this year. And so I've had my fair share of experiences, including of different contracts as well, from transitory through to more permanent ones. So I feel like I understand this very well indeed. So if you want to know more about everyday life here in South Italy, you are of course in the right place. Why not hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of my future content? And let's get into the first stage of what you need to consider when it comes to renting here in Italy. Stage 1, where and why? This, in my opinion, is one of the most important fundamental stages of all. And honestly, we do spend a lot of time in this stage. Don't get me wrong, you've got to think about this after all. But sometimes I don't think people spend enough time in this stage because we get a bit carried away with our dreams. We start running before we can walk, and we've already mentally moved to Italy before we've even really begun the research. We've got to slow it down a bit and spend a bit more time in this stage, because I promise you the next 3 stages that follow will be a lot easier if you have really taken the time to do your research in stage 1. It's so important for you to understand where in Italy you want to live. As you've probably already guessed, if you are a regular viewer of my channel, Italy is like 101 different countries rolled into one. So for this reason, living in different parts of Italy is likely to bring you a very different experience. You've got to factor in as well your own personal requirements, which is where the why comes into this particular stage. Where in Italy is going to suit you and what you need from your experience. For example, do you need to be near a school? Do you need to be close to public services and amenities, or are you happy to travel to them? Do you need the peace and quiet, or do you prefer city life? Is climate a factor for you? Do you want to live somewhere which feels a little cooler in the winter, or are you happy to be somewhere which can be very, very hot in the summer and, still pretty mild in the winter? Like, what is important for you? Do you want to be close to the sea? Do you want to be in the countryside? So many different requirements, all dependent on your own personal circumstances. And then of course, you've got to think about your budget. What do you want to spend on an apartment or on a villa, for example? And what can you afford, most importantly, to spend? Different parts of Italy will give you different types of home depending on essentially where in Italy you choose to live. So for example, Milan is considered to be one of the more expensive cities in Italy. So the cost of accommodation there is pretty sky high. Even in the south of Italy, which generally is considered to be more reasonable, you can find parts of South Italy where rents are pretty expensive, especially the Amalfi, and even Salerno, where I lived for 4 years, is considered to be one of the more expensive cities to live in South Italy. And then of course, here I am now in Palermo, which is a lot more reasonable in terms of rental prices, although you can find parts of Palermo where the prices are a little higher. So it pays to do your research in this respect. Understand what parts of Italy are more expensive, and understand what the comparison would be like if you were to live in a different region or a different part of Italy for the equivalent type of home. This is really important, and you do need to take your time with this. And I even recommend, if you can, including some travel to Italy during this particular stage, so you can feel for yourself what it's like to be in particular neighborhoods and in particular areas. Because as much as you can watch videos from content creators like myself on YouTube, or you can read blogs, or you can listen to podcasts, nothing actually beats the experience of being in a town or a city yourself, soaking up the atmosphere and understanding if you can really visualize yourself living in that particular area. That can only come through your own personal experience. And so I do recommend as well including some travel to Italy in this particular stage, which is why I say take your time with it. This isn't something that needs to be rushed. It's a big decision after all. And as I've said before, it's definitely going to help you, especially when it comes to stage 2. Stage 2, and we're off. So this is the moment you've been waiting for. You've decided upon your location, or maybe you've got a couple of locations you're deciding between. You know why you want to live in that particular part of Italy. So now you've got to start beginning to look for potential homes. Now, this can be a bit tricky, especially if you're based outside of Italy, but there are a couple of websites that I recommend that you take a look at. The first is Idealista, and the second is Immobiliare.it. Now, both of these websites I've already spoken about in a previous video. I will link it up here and actually show you how to use them to be able to search for homes in different parts of Italy. So make sure you watch that next so that you can begin the search for your home online. It's also worth noting that there are services for people who live outside of Italy to help them to find accommodation here in Italy itself. Now, whilst this can be super helpful, especially if you're limited on time or you don't have the ability to come over to Italy yourself to do some research, I do suggest that you do maintain an element of control when it comes to finding your own home, because essentially, nobody is you. Nobody can understand you as much as you do. And even if somebody has an idea of your requirements, they're not you. So, as I've already said, try to begin this stage yourself. And then if you really do need some help later on, that's when you may consider to enlist the services of these professionals who can kind of do the legwork for you here in Italy until you're ready to come and view what they found for you. Now, when it comes to searching for properties, there are a few things that you need to be aware of, and these are things that you need to be aware of whether you intend to look for properties online or whether you intend to come in person here to Italy and go to the individual estate agents in different towns and cities, or even if you enlist the services of a professional to find a home for you, you still need to be very aware of this particular aspect. And it is the type of contract that is linked to the property you're interested in. Now, chances are, if you are living outside of Italy and outside of Europe even, your kind of time here in Italy is going to be visa dependent, or there's going to be some kind of special reason that enables you to live in Italy on a long-term basis. And this is going to require you especially to make sure you have a place of residence here in Italy. Now, every person, even Italian citizens, have to be registered as resident at an address in Italy. So it's really important that the home you choose can support this option. Now, the reason I say this is because there are certain contracts that don't always allow you to do this. Transitory contracts are ones that you have to be particularly careful of. Now, it's not the same for every transitory contract. It's often stated by the landlord directly if residency cannot be claimed against the property. But it is worth noting that transitory contracts usually don't come with this option for residency unless there is an exception. Like, for example, the transitory contract that I had for a period in Salerno did allow me to have my residency registered to it, but that's an exception. It's not always how it is for everyone. So you need to make sure that you're clear on this. Also, be aware that transitory contracts don't really offer you a lot of protection. Often those homes are used in other ways at other times of the year, maybe Airbnbs or bed and breakfasts, which is why they can only ever be let to you on a short-term basis. But I kind of think long-term contracts are safer, and you can always claim your residency against a long-term contract. The two typical contracts that you'll find here in Italy are known as 4x4 or 3x2. 4x4 essentially means that you have the property for a period of 4 years and it will automatically renew for another 4 years afterwards at the same rent unless you choose to cancel. And then 3x2, it's the same, except you have the property for 3 years and it will automatically renew for another 2 years unless you choose to cancel. So there are lots of advantages to this, as I've spoken about in previous videos, primarily because you can be sure your rent is going to stay the same, which isn't always the case in other countries. So there are some pros to this, but it's not always easy sometimes to find the properties that allow you these options. So to know this from the beginning is definitely going to help you with your initial search. I recommend as well, of course, spending time here in Italy, renting out an Airbnb, coming over, experiencing life in your particular region, and of course, seeing the homes with your own eyes. It's a lot to trust another person to do this process for you. You need to really be eyes and ears all about when you're here in Italy. You've got to understand everything, particularly if this is not your country or you don't even speak the language. So I really do recommend that you factor in, again, some more travel to Italy. I know it's a difficult life, but you absolutely need to spend time here at this stage. You need to see the properties for yourself. You need to understand for yourself whether or not it's going to be suitable for you and your individual requirements. So this is something else that you need to think about within this stage as well, making sure you can allocate time in your diary to come over and to look at properties firsthand and to understand what could be right for you. So once you've kind of started to begin the search for properties, there are a few things that you really need to be aware of that might not be what you've expected. So that's when we arrive at stage 3. Stage 3, the complicated reality. Yes, I did tell you renting in Italy was a bit of a minefield, and we're about to explore just why that is. First of all, it's that whole expectation versus reality. Now, depending very much on the country you're coming from, please don't expect rental conditions to be anything like what you're used to. Certainly in the UK, it's unheard of to rent a home without a fitted kitchen, but here in Italy, it's very common. People literally pack up their kitchens like they pack their suitcases and move from home to home to home. So essentially, you could end up renting a shell of an apartment and have to pay yourself to have a bathroom and a kitchen fitted. You might be lucky and have the bathroom fitted, but it's rare that you have both fitted. And if you do find a home that is furnished in that way, and even with other types of furniture as well, snap it up, because they are very, very rare in Italy. The majority of lets are in this kind of condition where they are empty shells, and it's down to you to privately pay for the kitchen and the bathroom, for example. Your responsibilities as well are likely to be different to what you're used to as a tenant here in Italy. Now, this means that if certain things go wrong with the home, they could fall on you to have to shoulder the cost for, and not the landlord. Now, this really depends on your contract, and it depends on what is agreed between you and the landlord, but this could be things such as the boiler for the hot water. It could be things to do with like electricity or water supply. It could be something like this that you become responsible for if there is a problem. And these can be very costly indeed, especially if the property you're moving into is pretty old, which is another thing I want to say as well. It can be very romantic to dream about living in like the historical centre of a city, but please be aware with older properties come a whole heap of problems. And if they are not your own property, yet you are responsible for having to pay for the maintenance, it's a really big consideration. So sometimes I think it's better to leave the romantic, dreamy homes in the centre for just admiring as you walk through the centre itself, and actually choose somewhere that's a bit more modern with less risk of things going wrong. The next thing you've got to be aware of is to make sure that everything is in writing. Trust me, there is that Latin proverb where like written words remain and spoken words fly. It's so true. Everything needs to be in writing. That includes any furniture items or things that come inclusive of the home, any contractual obligations that you have as a tenant. Everything needs to be in writing. Do not take it as given if somebody promises you something verbally. It needs to be written down. And I say this because I've experienced this before, where we were promised something as part of our home and it wasn't delivered upon because it wasn't written in the contract. So learn from my mistake. Make sure everything is written down. Another thing you've got to be aware of is when it comes to deposits, and this is where like expectation versus reality, it can be different. So if you rent a home through an agency, then typically you will give an extra month's rent just for the agency fees alone. So you will always pay a month in advance. There's usually 1 month or 2 months rent, it depends on the home itself. And then on top of that, you have to expect to pay the agency another equivalent of a month's rent too. So it can be quite expensive at the beginning. This is where you have to manage your expectations in terms of your budget. You need to be aware of how much you need to put up front, especially when it comes to renting a home. But you can be sure that as long as it's in the contract regarding your deposit, you will receive what it is that you've paid back. But unfortunately, you don't receive back the fees that you pay to any agencies. So that's worth considering and bearing in mind as well. I will say though that if you intend to rent a home privately, make sure, as I've said before, that you have a written contract and that everything is registered. All rental contracts have to be registered with the local tax agency. So it's really important that you have this done, because you cannot register your residency unless the contract has been registered with the tax agency. So if there's any loopholes or people say don't worry about doing that, then there's something a bit off with that. So you need to be careful, and also especially if there is no contract given to you, because as much as it might suit you on a short-term basis to be in this situation, it doesn't give you any security at all. So really and truly make sure that you are savvy and you do your due diligence when it comes to contracts, because it's the biggest thing that I see most people have trouble with when it comes to renting here in Italy. The next thing I want to say is about discrimination. And I have heard this a lot, particularly in online expat groups, people saying that they find it difficult to rent a home because Italians don't like to rent their properties to foreigners. Now, I will say that this is also the case for fellow Italians as well. Italians in general are very nervous about renting their homes, particularly because the laws make it very difficult to evict tenants, especially if they have families. And so once you are in possession of a home, it can be very costly and very difficult to remove tenants from your home. And so as a result, landlords can be very, very protective about the people that they allow into their home as tenants. This might mean that they want references, or they want to see work contracts, or they want to see evidence of your earnings. There can be very intrusive questions asked at this point, because the landlord wants to feel confident in their choice about choosing you as a tenant for their property. Now, in some cases, it may feel like this is discrimination because you think, another Italian person is not being asked this. But yes, there may be an element of discrimination somewhere. I think I'd probably be lying if I said there wasn't. However, I will say that it can be equally difficult for Italian people themselves to rent for the same reason. So I just think it's the mindset of people here and the way that the laws are designed to be more in favour of tenants than in terms of landlords themselves, which is why I think this can have a ripple effect and a knock-on effect for you when it comes to trying to find somewhere to rent. So when you've managed some of these expectations and the complicated reality of renting here in Italy, let's talk about stage 4, which is the most serious stage of all. Stage 4, money, honey. Yes, this is the stage where you've got to start paying for your new life in Italy. And this is where you've really, really got to be savvy. Now, I touched on this in the previous stage when I mentioned about contracts and the deposit you have to pay down. So there's that you have to factor in, how much money you need upfront to be able to secure the home that you're interested in. You've also got to think about condominium costs. Now, these are not often included in your rent, but it essentially means if you have an apartment in a residence, in a building with other apartments, then generally speaking, there is usually a condominium cost that every single apartment pays towards every single month for the upkeep and maintenance of the building and for any cleaning services that may be offered. Now, this really does depend on the building, on the services that are offered and included as part of the condominium. So the price is very difficult to generalize, but this could be anywhere from like 60 euros a month upwards. So this is something else that you need to factor in as well, because it is usually on top of your rent. So if you're already paying a very high rent and then you have maybe 60 euros upwards to pay per month for condominium fees, it suddenly becomes a hell of a lot more expensive. So definitely something to be aware of. Hidden costs, number one, I would say, are those sneaky condominium fees. And then you have your utilities to think about. Now, I know a few of you mentioned in the comments on my YouTube videos about the cost of utilities here in Italy. Now, this really depends on personal use, personal consumption. It's impossible for me to sit here and tell you how much it will cost you because everybody is so different. However, these are some things that you need to know. When you rent a home in Italy, you will be responsible for the utilities. You will need to take the utilities out in your name. Now, different service providers will offer different tariffs and different rates, and those tariffs and rates can offer different prices depending on when in the day you use your electricity. So this is something else to consider as well, because some tariffs offer better rates at night, others better rates very early in the morning. So you need to be aware of this, because if you're out at work all day, maybe it's not a problem for you to come home and do your washing at night, for example, but you know, that doesn't always work for everyone. So you need to do your research. There are a lot of energy companies here in Italy, so you need to do your research and find the best tariff and deal for you. Also, you need to make sure that you are shown as a resident on your energy bill, because residential rates tend to be better than those that are non-resident. I had this issue when I moved here to Palermo, that when I first took out the electricity bill in my name, it was showing that I was a non-resident. So I had to tell them, no, I'm resident, and then they changed it. And I think it does affect the end tariff that you end up paying as well, because I've read as well in different expat groups that if you are not resident in your home, you end up paying like an extra service charge for the months that you are not in your home, because you are still having to pay for the service they are providing. So yeah, definitely make sure that you are shown as resident on any kind of utility contracts that you take out. Note as well that when you open a utility contract, you will be responsible for paying a fee for the opening and creation of the contract itself. Doesn't matter that you're now a new paying customer, you've got to pay for that privilege. And this can vary, but you can expect maybe 60 to 80 euros as an estimate, but it all depends on the energy company. So that's something else to consider. That will be either included in your first bill or will be the very first thing that you pay, and then your first bill will come later. You want to make the most of things as well, like paying for your bills online. Now, here in South Italy especially, things can be a bit traditional. You are usually sent the paper bill in the post, and people traditionally go to the post office or the tobacco shops to pay the bill. However, not only is this just a really lengthy process, like there are usually lots of people in these places, but you also pay like an extra €2 or so for the privilege of paying it at the shop or at the post office. So I prefer to pay online because it means that you don't pay those extra fees. And as much as in the moment it might just be like €2, when you add that up over the course of a year, considering all the other things you already pay for, I prefer to keep those €2 for myself. So this is something else to think about. Also consider going paperless, because a lot of companies will charge you extra for sending you the paper copy of your bill. So these are some extra things that you need to consider when it comes to utility and energy companies here in Italy. Now, it pretty much goes without saying, but before you can really do any of this here in Italy, you need to make sure you've registered for your codice fiscale, which is your tax code. Your tax code is like the key to your life here in Italy, and without it, it will be extremely difficult, nigh on impossible, to do any of the things that I've already spoken about in this video. So make sure that you register for your tax code. You just need to go to your local tax office. I think you can even do it online, but don't quote me on that. And then you can get your tax code opened. It's probably one of the most efficient services, I wonder why, that is offered here in Italy, but it's essential in order for you to actually be able to start your life here. So I just needed to add that here because it's really the key to doing anything that I'm talking about in this video. You will also need to register for what is known as the rubbish tax. Now, it really depends on your region. Some regions require you to register for this tax first before you can confirm your residency to be sure that you're actually going to pay it, whereas others will allow you to register the residency first and then automatically inform the rubbish tax office that you are living there, and they will then send you the bill. This is an extremely important tax in Italy, and even though you can walk around and not really see evidence of it being put to good use, it is something that you must pay. So make sure that this is something else that is factored into your administration when it comes to renting a home here in Italy, because you will definitely need to have your rubbish tax registered to your residency address. And something else that I needed to mention as well was about the energy certificate for your home. Now, in order to be able to register your contract at the residency office, they want to see everything. They want to see your rental contract, they want to see the energy certificate, they want to see the floor plan of your home. So you need to make sure that your contract is a full contract with all of this information present, and if it's not, you need to make sure you can obtain it from your landlord. It's really important because essentially the size of your home is also dependent on the rubbish tax that you will pay as well, which is where that aspect kicks in. Not forgetting, of course, the other costs that naturally come as a result of you moving in Italy, including the cost of having your boxes and items shipped over. Watch this video up here if you're not sure what to pack for your move to Italy, because I don't think you need to bring everything. That video will tell you why. And also, if you buy furniture and things when you're here living in Italy, you're going to have to employ the services, especially if you live in a block of flats, for example, of, I think it's a transloco. It's essentially the people that come with the ladder, who will bring your boxes up through your balcony, because it's not normal for people to carry furniture and heavy boxes up flights of stairs or in the elevator. So yes, there's a lot to consider, but overall stage 4 is where you need to get wise with your money, and you need to really understand the things that you need to pay for so that you prepare your new life here in Italy in a very efficient way. So I hope this video has helped you to understand a little better the things that you need to consider when renting in Italy. If you have any other questions specifically about renting in Italy, then why not comment below and I'll do my best to answer them, if not in the comments in a future video. And why not watch this video next? Because in this video, I also continue this theme of talking about some of the things you need to be aware of when renting here in Italy. So I think that could help you a lot too. I will see you in the next video.